The sky was unusually clear that morning, the kind of crisp coastal dawn that usually calmed my nerves. But not today. Something stirred uncomfortably beneath my ribs, an anxiety I couldn't explain, but couldn't ignore either. My name is Harper Vance. I am 37, a marine biologist based in Seabridge, a sleepy harbor town in Oregon where everything smells like pine, sea salt, and nostalgia. I spend my days studying jellyfish migration and microplastics, often lost in tide charts and water samples. It's quiet work, methodical. Just how I like it. My husband, Theo, is a retired firefighter turned artisan woodworker. He has those big, calming hands that seem to silence chaos just by existing. We've been together almost a decade, building a life by the sea, raising our daughter Isla. Isla is 4 years old, impossibly curious, wild-haired, and utterly obsessed with seals and bubble baths. She's the kind of child who asks if clouds have names and tries to speak to earthworms. But underneath her boundless energy lies a frightening vulnerability, a severe allergy to sesame. We discovered it when she was just a baby. A single taste of hummus at a family picnic triggered a terrifying spiral, red blotches blooming across her skin, lips swelling, breath shortening. Theo had rushed her to the hospital, and I remember gripping her limp body in the ER while the doctors moved with cold urgency. It was anaphylaxis. Life-threatening. One of those medical terms that becomes your new normal. Since then, our lives changed overnight. Every snack, every birthday party, every restaurant visit had to be cross-checked, researched, and approved. We carried EpiPens the way other people carried phones. We trained babysitters, daycare staff, even some of our friends. We laminated emergency instruction sheets and labeled every lunchbox in bold red letters. No sesame, allergy, danger. Most people understood. Most people listened. But not Theo's mother. Nadine Hartwell is a woman forged in old-school fire and pride. At 63, she still dresses like she's hosting a tea party in the 1950s and talks like the world stopped evolving after 1982. She raised 4 kids, managed the bakery for 3 decades, and sees modern parenting as a parade of overprotection and softness. From the first day we told her about Isla's allergy, she rolled her eyes and waved it off. Sesame? What, like in a bun? She'd laugh. I used to bake with sesame oil every day. Nobody died. We tried reasoning with her, showing her Isla's medical files, even sitting down with her while the allergist explained the severity of it. But she always dismissed it as fear-mongering and New Age nonsense. She just needs to toughen up, Nadine would mutter under her breath. Can't live her whole life scared of a seed. The tension between us never boiled into open warfare, but it simmered quietly. Every family gathering felt like a minefield. She would bring dishes to dinner that might contain sesame, saying, "Well, I didn't add any, but you never know, right?" And then smirk like it was a joke. Theo was always caught in the middle. He loved his mother, but he saw what I saw, the subtle defiance, the dangerous disbelief. He tried to mediate. He told her we were just trying to keep our daughter alive. Still, I always feared there would come a day when Nadine's skepticism would cross a line. That day arrived quietly. It was a Thursday afternoon when the call came. The Marine Institute was requesting immediate help. A mass bloom of box jellyfish had washed ashore, and they needed all hands on deck for overnight containment and analysis. I wasn't scheduled, but I was the only senior marine biologist available. Theo was already out of town at a craft expo in Bend, and Isla's daycare didn't do overnight care. We scrambled to find backup. Our sitter was unavailable. Neighbors were out of town. My parents were on a cruise. That left only one person, Nadine. To her credit, she jumped at the chance. "I'd love to watch Isla. I've been telling you 2 for years I could handle it," she said, a little too smugly. Every muscle in my body tensed, but Theo reminded me we were out of options. So I did what I could to prevent disaster. I prepared everything in painstaking detail. I packed Isla's meals: mac and cheese with steamed broccoli, yogurt with strawberries, her favorite banana muffin made from scratch. I labeled every container in bold ink: safe, no sesame, allergy alert. I wrote down emergency contacts, stuck a laminated allergy guide to the fridge, and left EpiPens in 3 different, visible locations. Before leaving, I sat down with Nadine and walked her through it all again. If anything happens, any rash, any swelling, you call 911 and use the EpiPen. It's not a suggestion. It's life or death. Nadine rolled her eyes. Harper, I've taken care of children sicker than Isla. You're turning her into a little China doll. I clenched my jaw, kissed Isla goodbye, and walked out the door with dread clawing at my spine. All through the night, I couldn't focus. While the team logged samples and tested salinity levels, my mind kept returning to Isla. I texted Nadine twice. Her reply was curt: she's asleep. All good. I finished work at dawn, drove back with bleary eyes and coffee-stained lips, and pulled into our driveway just as the sun kissed the treetops. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped inside and was greeted by the warm scent of baked goods. And something else. A familiar, nutty aroma that sent ice through my veins. I followed the smell into the kitchen. There, on the breakfast table, was a plate with a half-eaten sesame bagel. And beside it, perched on a stool, was Isla. Cheerfully munching away. Time slowed. My brain screamed, but my feet stayed frozen. I could only stare as Isla, my 4-year-old, reached for another bite of that cursed sesame bagel, smiling, completely unaware that poison was passing her lips. Then I moved. I rushed forward, knocking the plate away with such force it hit the wall and shattered, cream cheese and bread scattering across the kitchen tiles. Isla blinked at me, startled. Her little hand hovered in the air where the bagel had been. "Mommy?" she whispered, her voice full of confusion. Nadine appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Well, good morning," she said cheerfully. "You're back early." I couldn't even find my voice. I turned to Isla and dropped to my knees. Her cheeks were flushed. A pink rash was already blooming across her neck. My fingers trembled as I brushed her bangs away and looked closer. Her lower lip had started to swell. "No, no, no," I whispered, panic wrapping around my throat like barbed wire. Theo and I had gone over the signs of anaphylaxis 1,000 times: skin redness, swelling of the lips, itching, difficulty breathing. Isla had displayed them all during her first episode. And now, it was happening again. Isla scratched at her throat. "It's itchy, Mommy," she whimpered. "It's hard to talk." I turned, fury finally giving me voice. "What did you feed her, Nadine?" She shrugged, utterly unbothered. "A bagel. She was hungry. And she liked it." My voice cracked. "Was it sesame?" She raised her brows, like it was a trick question. Of course it was. All good bagels have sesame. She's been too sheltered. It's time she learned how to eat like a normal kid. Something inside me snapped. "You knew?" I screamed, standing so fast the stool beside me toppled. "You knew she was allergic. I told you. I left you instructions, meals, warnings. How could you be this reckless?" Nadine scoffed. "You exaggerate everything. She's fine. A little rash never hurt anyone." I was already reaching for the EpiPen. I sprinted to the hallway cabinet, flung it open, and yanked the kit down. Thank God she hadn't moved it. Isla was now coughing. Her breaths came in short, wheezing gasps. Her eyes were wide with panic. I knelt, ripped the cap off the EpiPen, and injected it into her thigh through her pajama pants. She whimpered, more in fear than pain. "It's okay, baby. I'm right here. I've got you," I whispered, holding her to my chest. Behind me, Nadine still stood with that maddeningly calm expression. "You didn't need to do that. It's just a reaction, and I used to get the same thing when she was little. She grew out of it." I turned my head slowly. "You're not a doctor. You're not even listening. This isn't a phase. This is life or death." I pulled out my phone and called 911, voice shaking as I gave them our address. My daughter's having an anaphylactic reaction. I've administered an EpiPen, but she's worsening. Please send an ambulance immediately. After I hung up, Nadine reached out, attempting to touch Isla's shoulder. I stepped between them. Don't you dare touch her. I'll come with you to the hospital, she said, her voice suddenly smaller. You've done enough, I said coldly. Isla was breathing a little easier, but not by much. Her skin was blotchy, her lips puffier than before. The EpiPen had bought us time, but not much. I bundled her into a blanket, held her tight, and carried her to the car. Nadine followed to the porch, calling out my name. I didn't look back. The hospital was 15 minutes away, but every second dragged like a lifetime. Isla whimpered softly in the back seat, clutching her favorite sea turtle plush. I talked the entire way, trying to keep her conscious. You're doing so good, sweetheart. We're almost there. Mommy's right here. I ignored the traffic lights when I could, honking, weaving through sleepy drivers, praying I wouldn't get stopped. When I screeched into the emergency entrance, the staff recognized me immediately. I worked with some of them through my institute's public health initiatives. A nurse rushed out with a stretcher. Anaphylaxis? She asked. Yes. Sesame exposure. EpiPen administered 5 minutes ago, I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. Isla was wheeled inside in a blur of movement, oxygen mask, IVs, shouted orders. I followed until they closed the treatment room doors. I collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting area, hands trembling, adrenaline still pumping. 20 minutes later, the pediatric ER doctor, someone I vaguely knew from a public safety seminar, approached with a clipboard. Her face was serious, but not grim. She's stable, she said gently. Her airway is improving, and we've administered a steroid and a second round of epinephrine. She'll need to stay overnight for observation, but it looks like you got to her just in time. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I nodded, too emotional to speak. Then I called Theo. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, love. Everything okay? No, I said, my voice breaking. It's Isla. She had a reaction. I'm at the hospital. There was a pause. How? He asked, voice suddenly sharp. What happened? Your mom gave her a sesame bagel. Another silence. This one longer. I'm on my way, he said finally. 2 hours later, Theo burst into the hospital room, his face pale, lips pressed tight. He went straight to Isla, brushing her hair back and whispering to her. Then he turned to me. She gave her sesame? He asked again, like he still didn't believe it. I nodded. On purpose. Said she needed to stop being coddled. Theo's hands curled into fists. She could have died, he whispered. Just then, I heard voices in the hallway, familiar ones. I stepped into the corridor and saw Nadine and Theo's sister, Anna, standing by the nurse's station. Nadine looked uncertain, her eyes red. Anna looked furious. Theo followed me out. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I came to apologize, Nadine said. I don't want your apology, I said. I want accountability. But I didn't mean to, she started. That's the problem, I snapped. You didn't mean to. But you still did. She almost died. Nadine shrank back. Anna stepped in. Harper's right, she said, surprising us both. You've been downplaying this for years. It's time you listened. Theo's voice was quiet, but unyielding. You need to go. We'll talk when Isla's safe. But not before. Nadine looked like she wanted to argue, but Anna gently took her arm and guided her away. I returned to Isla's side. She was dozing, hooked up to monitors, but alive. That was all that mattered. For now. The morning after the incident, the hospital room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the oxygen machine and the slow, steady beep of the heart monitor. I sat beside Isla's bed, holding her tiny hand in both of mine. She looked small in the oversized hospital gown, her face still pale, with faint traces of rash along her jawline. but she was breathing steadily. Her chest rose and fell in gentle rhythm. Theo hadn't left her side all night. He sat on the narrow visitor's cot, back curved, head in his hands. Neither of us slept. At around 9 a.m., there was a knock on the door. A woman stepped in, professional but approachable, dressed in a soft gray pantsuit with a badge clipped to her belt. "Mrs. Vance? I'm Margaret Dyer from the Seabridge Division of Child Protective Services," she said gently. "The hospital filed a report last night regarding Isla's allergic reaction." I blinked, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion. "They reported it?" "Yes," she said. "Given the circumstances, the documented allergy, the EpiPen use, and the fact that the caregiver knowingly ignored medical directives, it qualifies as medical negligence under Oregon's child safety statutes. I understand this is a very difficult time, but I'd like to talk with you and your husband, if that's all right." Theo stood slowly, his voice hoarse. "We'll talk." We stepped outside into a quiet conference room, leaving Isla under the nurse's watchful eye. I retold everything. The food labeling, the laminated instructions, the emergency drills I'd walked Nadine through. The fact that she had deliberately given Isla a sesame bagel after years of mocking the allergy. Margaret took notes quietly. "You've done everything right," she said after I finished. "Unfortunately, in these cases, the law has to take over to protect the child. You have the right to press charges for negligence, and we strongly advise putting a no-contact order in place." Theo glanced at me. His jaw was clenched, eyes red with fury and disbelief. "This isn't just about anger," I said softly. "It's about making sure it never happens again." Margaret nodded. "Exactly. If you'd like, I can connect you with a family law attorney. Someone who specializes in child safety and protective orders." Theo agreed before I could respond. "Yes. Please do that." Later that afternoon, Margaret returned with contact information for a lawyer named Julian Rowe. By the time we checked Isla out of the hospital the next day, we had an appointment scheduled. Isla's health was slowly improving. We kept her on a steroid taper and antihistamines for the next week. She was tired, clingy, and unusually quiet. She wouldn't touch food unless I gave it to her directly. I didn't blame her. Theo and I alternated sleeping in her room, waking at every cough or shift under the blankets. Nadine called the house twice. We didn't answer. Anna called once, and I picked up. Her voice was hesitant. "I wanted to check on Isla," she said. "And to apologize for Mom." I didn't say anything. "She's not trying to dodge blame," Anna continued, "but she still doesn't get it. She keeps saying she was just trying to help Isla overcome the allergy. Like it's something to push through." "She doesn't get to push through anaphylaxis," I replied, my voice cold. "I know," Anna said. "I know. I don't know how to fix this." "You don't," I said. "She does. And even then, I don't know if it will matter." The next morning, we met Julian Rowe in a small law office downtown. He was in his late 50s, kind-eyed but razor-sharp. He listened as we laid out everything that had happened, taking notes with precise legal shorthand. "The law is very clear on this," he said when we finished. "This was not an accident. It was deliberate exposure after repeated warnings. That's not just negligence, it borders on endangerment. The fact that your daughter survived does not lessen the severity." "What can we do?" Theo asked. Julian tapped his pen against a legal pad. "First, we file for a temporary protective order. This will legally prevent your mother-in-law from contacting or approaching Isla while the case is reviewed. We'll attach all relevant medical records, text messages, and statements. After that, we prepare for a formal hearing. Based on the strength of your documentation, I believe the judge will grant a 6-month protection order at minimum." Theo looked at me. His eyes were filled with pain. "She's my mother," he said, almost to himself. "But I can't. I can't risk my daughter's life." I reached for his hand. "She had her chance. We warned her. She didn't listen." Julian leaned back in his chair. You're doing the right thing. Isla's safety has to come first. The paperwork was filed that day. 2 days later, we received notice. The emergency order had been granted. Nadine Hartwell was forbidden from coming within 100 feet of our property or Isla's daycare, and from making any contact until the court hearing. Theo delivered the news to her himself. I wasn't in the room, but I heard the conversation through the door. I didn't mean to hurt her, Nadine sobbed. You almost killed her, Theo replied, his voice cold but steady. This isn't about what you meant. It's about what you did. She's my granddaughter, Theo. And you treated her like a stubborn recipe instead of a person. The line went quiet after that. But the fallout had only just begun. Nadine began telling people, friends, church members, former co-workers, that we were turning Isla against her. She painted us as overprotective zealots, said we were humiliating her in front of her own community. But the tide turned against her quickly. Several families in the congregation had children with allergies. One mother, whose son had a gluten sensitivity, confronted her outright. You fed your granddaughter something that could kill her, she said. That's not a misunderstanding. That's cruelty. Calls stopped coming. Invitations dried up. Nadine's social circle, once bustling with community brunches and charity bake sales, went silent. Still, she refused to reach out to us again. Only Anna visited. She brought groceries, helped clean, and quietly asked if we were okay. She didn't push. She just showed up. And that, strangely, helped more than anything else. But healing? That felt impossibly far away. We weren't just angry, we were shattered. The fragile trust we had built with family had been demolished in a single moment of defiance. Now, everything felt like paperwork and courtrooms. But at the center of it all was Isla, still recovering, still vulnerable. And that was all the reason we needed to keep going. Even if it meant drawing a line no family should ever have to draw. 2 weeks later, the courthouse felt colder than the sea in winter. Theo and I walked through the wide stone archway hand in hand, both of us dressed in quiet, formal tones. Neither of us said much during the drive. The car ride had been filled with tension, the kind that sits thick in the air, tightening your throat and numbing your fingers. We left Isla with our trusted neighbor, Marnie, a retired nurse who had been one of the first to truly grasp the gravity of our daughter's condition. She knew where every EpiPen was, how to read the signs, and most importantly, she listened. We owed her more than we could say. Our lawyer, Julian Rowe, was already waiting for us at the courthouse steps. His briefcase was stuffed with documents, hospital records, CPS reports, photographs of Isla in the ER, annotated copies of the allergy guide we'd given Nadine. There was even a signed acknowledgement form from Nadine herself, dated 6 months prior, confirming that she had read and understood Isla's allergy protocols. We had almost forgotten we'd made her sign it. But it would prove to be crucial. Are you ready for this? Julian asked gently. Theo nodded. I wasn't sure if I was. But I said yes. We stepped into the courtroom. The high ceilings and polished wooden benches gave the room an eerie calm, as though even the walls were bracing for conflict. Nadine arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by her own attorney. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her usual bouffant hairstyle was pinned in a simple bun, her makeup minimal. She wore a dark coat, clasped tightly at her chest, as if shielding herself from more than the cold. Anna trailed behind her, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She offered me a faint nod. I returned it. As we all sat, the judge entered, a woman in her mid-50s with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. She glanced at both legal teams before addressing the room. This court is convened to determine whether the existing emergency protective order regarding Isla events shall be extended or modified, based on the circumstances presented. Julian rose first. He spoke with calm conviction, laying out the facts: Isla's documented allergy, the explicit warnings given to Nadine, the evidence of prior dismissals, the EpiPen administration, the hospitalization, And the report from Child Protective Services. He placed a photograph on the table, the image of Isla lying pale in a hospital bed, oxygen mask covering half her face. Your Honor, Julian said, his voice unwavering, this is not a case of miscommunication. This is a case of repeated, willful disregard. Mrs. Hartwell had every tool, every warning, and every resource she needed to protect her granddaughter. And yet, she chose to ignore it all. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable. Then it was Nadine's turn. Her lawyer began with a different tone, measured, apologetic, even emotional. Mrs. Hartwell deeply regrets what occurred. She believed, incorrectly, yes, that exposure could help her granddaughter build tolerance. It was misguided, but not malicious. She was relying on anecdotal experiences from her past, not out of defiance, but from a lack of understanding. Theo gripped my hand under the table. Then Nadine herself stood up. I know I made a terrible mistake, she said softly. I thought I was helping. I thought if I did what I'd done with my daughter Anna, maybe Isla would get used to it. Anna, seated behind her, stirred. Then she stood. Excuse me, Your Honor, she said. May I speak? The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. You may. Anna stepped forward, cleared her throat, and looked straight at her mother. You keep saying you helped me get over an allergy. But that never happened. I had a mild rash once. The doctor said it wasn't serious. You made up the rest because you didn't like being told what to do. You didn't cure me, Mom. You ignored a diagnosis, and now you're using that to justify nearly killing Isla. Nadine's face crumpled. Her hands gripped the edge of the defense table like it was the only thing holding her up. I thought, she began. You thought you were right, and I interrupted. Like you always do. The courtroom fell quiet. The judge looked down at her notes for a long moment before speaking. This court does not consider intent irrelevant, but we must prioritize the welfare of the child above all else. She turned her gaze to Nadine. Mrs. Hartwell, your actions displayed an extraordinary lapse in judgment. Despite explicit medical advice, written warnings, and verbal instructions, you chose to override a parent's direction and expose a vulnerable child to a known allergen. This behavior constitutes negligence. Nadine nodded, eyes downcast, her voice barely a whisper. I understand. The judge continued. Accordingly, the court is extending the protective order for a period of 6 months. During this time, you are prohibited from approaching Isla Vance or entering her home or daycare without express, written consent from both parents. Any violation will be subject to criminal charges. Then she added, more firmly, additionally, you are hereby ordered to complete a certified educational course on pediatric allergy safety and complete 150 hours of community service with an organization that supports families managing chronic health conditions. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed through the room like a final warning. It was over. Or at least, this chapter was. Outside the courthouse, the wind had picked up. Theo and I stood on the steps for a moment, just breathing. Behind us, Anna spoke softly to her mother. We couldn't hear the words. Nadine didn't look up. Eventually, they walked away in separate directions. Theo reached for my hand again. We did the right thing. Yes, I said. For Isla. In the weeks that followed, the effects of the ruling rippled outward. Nadine's absence from Isla's life became quietly noticeable. Isla didn't ask about her, but she hesitated whenever someone offered her food she didn't recognize. She looked to me first, wide-eyed, waiting for a nod. At church, Nadine's usual circle had thinned. Word had spread. Some people sympathized with her. Others, particularly parents, kept their distance. Meanwhile, Nadine began her mandated education. At first, she resisted, argued with the instructors, challenged the curriculum. But something shifted after the 3rd session. Maybe it was hearing other parents' stories. Maybe it was seeing photos of children lost to allergic reactions. Maybe it was finally realizing Isla could have been one of them. She started volunteering at a children's allergy awareness group. Organizing supplies. setting up booths. Quiet, behind-the-scenes work. It didn't erase what happened, but it showed something new, effort. But for us, forgiveness wasn't immediate. It couldn't be. Not after what we'd almost lost. What we were still rebuilding. Spring arrived quietly in Seabridge, carried in on salty breezes and clusters of wild daffodils blooming along the fence lines. After months of tightly coiled tension and cautious routines, our family had finally begun to breathe again. Isla's energy had returned. Her laughter once again filled the corners of our little home, though now, there was a lingering hesitance in how she interacted with the world. She double-checked everything she ate, even things she'd loved for years. At only 4, she had learned something most children never had to, that her own body could turn against her with the wrong bite. Theo and I were different, too. A layer of hyper-awareness had settled into our bones. Even in safe spaces, our kitchen, her daycare, we remained alert. Trauma has a way of reshaping your instincts, especially when it brushes against the very edge of losing your child. We still hadn't spoken to Nadine directly since the court hearing. The restraining order remained in effect, and even if it hadn't, we weren't ready. Trust doesn't return just because someone says sorry, it rebuilds, slowly, painfully, like bone after a fracture. But there were signs. Nadine had complied with every part of the judge's orders. She completed her pediatric allergy safety course and, to our surprise, enrolled in 2 additional workshops on nutrition and child development. She even began volunteering weekly with a local nonprofit that supports families of children with chronic illnesses. Flyers from their events occasionally appeared in our mailbox, not with notes or apologies, just gentle evidence of her presence and participation. Anna continued to visit us regularly. She never pushed Nadine's case or tried to mediate. Instead, she helped with groceries, cleaned the gutters, and read stories to Isla. One afternoon, as Isla napped, Anna sat with me on the porch, her hands curled around a cup of chamomile tea. "Mom's different now," she said quietly. "I won't say she's completely changed. But she's listening in a way I've never seen before. She asks questions. She takes notes. The other day, she corrected someone at church who said allergies were made up. I said nothing. Anna sighed. She's scared. Not of the court. Of losing you. Of never seeing Isla again. She should be," I replied after a pause. "That's the cost of what she did." Anna nodded. "I know. And she knows too. But if you ever feel ready, just ready, not forgiving, she'd like a chance to show it." I didn't respond. Not then. But her words stayed with me. Isla's 5th birthday came on a sunny Saturday in May. We kept the guest list small, a few of her closest friends from preschool, some neighbors, and a couple of colleagues from the research institute who had kids her age. We decorated the backyard with strings of paper jellyfish, seashell garlands, and an inflatable kiddie pool filled with plastic ocean creatures. Theo built a mini wooden stage where Isla could perform her sea songs, and I prepared allergy-safe snacks down to the last grain. Not a trace of sesame, or uncertainty, in sight. The party was joyful. Loud music, squeals of laughter, water balloons, and too much frosting. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like normalcy. Just as the sun began to dip and guests started packing up, I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone else. I opened the front door cautiously. Nadine stood on the porch, alone, holding a small gift bag in one hand and a children's book in the other. She wore a simple green cardigan and flats. Her hair, once always styled unlacquered, now hung softly around her face. Her expression wasn't defiant or defensive. It was quiet. Humble. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," she said gently, her voice rough. "And I'll leave right away if you say so. I wanted to try. Just for 5 minutes. I brought something for Isla." I didn't move. I looked back toward the backyard, where Theo was pouring juice and Isla was dancing barefoot on the grass. Nadine didn't press. "I've been learning. Listening." I've changed some things. Not just what I know about allergies, but what I believe. I didn't trust her. Not fully. Maybe not even halfway. But there was something genuine in her voice, a weight that hadn't been there before. I called Theo to the door. He stepped out, took one look at his mother, then turned to me. "If you're okay with it. Just for a little while," he said, his tone cautious. I nodded. Nadine followed us into the backyard slowly, stopping near the garden, keeping her distance. She waited for permission before stepping closer. When we gave a subtle nod, she approached Isla, knelt beside her, and said softly, "Hi, Isla. It's Grandma. Do you remember me?" Isla paused. She glanced at me. I smiled and gave her a small nod. "Hi," Isla said finally, voice curious. Nadine opened the gift bag. Inside was a picture book titled Ellie's Safe Kitchen, Cooking Without Allergies. The cover showed a cartoon girl wearing an apron, holding a cooking spoon in one hand and an EpiPen in the other. "I thought you might like this," Nadine said. "It's about a girl who loves to cook, but she has a lot of allergies, just like you." Isla took the book and flipped through it. "Can you read it with me?" she asked. Nadine looked at me again. I hesitated. Then nodded. She sat on the grass beside Isla and began to read, her voice trembling slightly, but steady enough. As she turned each page, Isla asked questions, pointed to the pictures, and eventually rested her head against Nadine's arm. When the story ended, Nadine looked into Isla's eyes and said softly, "I made a big mistake, Isla. A really big one. But I've learned a lot since then. And I promise, I will never, ever do anything to make you sick again." Isla blinked at her, silent for a moment. Then, in the pure innocence only a child can muster, she said, "Okay, Grandma." It broke me. Not because I was ready to forgive. But because Isla was. Later, after the guests had gone and the yard was quiet again, I walked Nadine to the door. She stopped at the threshold. "Thank you," she said. "For giving me a chance to say something real. I know I'm not owed your trust. I just want you to know I'll keep earning it." I looked at her, long and hard. "We're just beginning," I said. "This doesn't erase what happened. But showing up like this. It matters." She nodded. "I'll keep showing up. However long it takes." That night, as Theo and I sat at the kitchen table, watching Isla draw jellyfish on scrap paper, he reached for my hand. "What do you think?" he asked. I stared out the window, at the stars hanging above the pines, at the shadow of our backyard where healing had begun. "I think she's learning," I said. "And so are we." He nodded. "One step at a time?" "One step," I agreed. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it.